Hey, hello everyone. We've got 5 people waiting for us. That's good.
Where is the tweet? I feel like I should have tweeted this out.
You can send the YouTube stream pretty easily if people want to follow you live. That's possibly the most efficient way of doing it. I've gotten so lazy at this because I have not had to do it in person. Normally I have had everything set up. Since I'm at home, I've had to actually make my son's lunch and stuff like that.
I made like fried rice for lunch because I didn't have time to do anything. I just chucked in the corn and the peas and tomato sauce on my fried rice.
Tomato sauce in your fried rice.
It's delicious, trust me.
Just I'd use barbecuey sauces in my fried rice because it gives you more of that full flavor of things. Welcome everyone to Fried Rice, the Fried Rice Meetup, where every month we talk about new and exciting things about fried rice. Can't even remember how to use Keynote properly because I'm so professional. Hey, branding, look at that. How professional we are. This is the thing I usually leave up at the start just to make sure people realize that they've joined the right meetup and they haven't stumbled into fried rice aficionados or something. Because you wouldn't want to do the wrong thing there.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey there, how are you guys? That sounds like a great meetup. The fried rice.
I was watching the YouTube stream, which I can confirm is working perfectly. And then I realized you were all here on Zoom. So I thought I'd join.
You can do both and up our numbers that mean absolutely nothing to us. You get to talk to us if you're on Zoom. All right, give everyone a few more minutes, I think, before we get cracking. Because people in Australia are usually pretty timely. Singapore, everyone's late. We found that we had to, I'm reading the captions as they go, and it's quite disturbing because they're auto captions. And when they get the word wrong, I just wonder what on earth the poor people reading them are going to interpret. All right, I might go cracking anyway, because why not? Oh, you can see my cursor. This is terrible. Welcome everyone to Talk CSS. Yay, this is number 8, which is weird because we run technically every 2 months, but then lockdown happened and we couldn't meet in person, and then we couldn't really be bothered. And so here we are, having made it to number 8 after a year and a half, just out of sheer determination that we want to keep going despite everything else. Because there are so many non-screen things that you could be doing right now, and yet, welcome to Melbourne CSS. Most important thing before we get too far is the code of conduct, because we have a code of conduct and we would like everyone here to adhere to this code of conduct. The short version of it is be excellent with each other. The long version of it is we do not tolerate anyone who is Nazi or sexist or otherwise trying to be mean to other people. we do take this very seriously. If you do encounter any problems, please talk directly to myself. I'm pretty easy to find. And if you are someone who violates the rules, you will not be invited back in a hurry. If you would like to read our full code of conduct, jump on our GitHub account and find it there. Normally, this would be sponsored by Iris because we'd be meeting in person at Iris. One day, eventually, we'll be back there, and then this will be a relevant slide. Until then, you just need to pretend that they've done something. Because normally they provide food and drinks and things, which is awesome. And the venue, which is even better. But, just think positive things about this company until then. Culture Amp are also a sponsor when we meet up in person, because we need that when we're in person, but we don't need it now because we don't have anything. Thank you, Culture Amp. My Wi-Fi just cut. Am I back? I'm back. New and exciting thing that's happened is I've mentioned Flat White before, which we started off as a Slack group, but people who are far more with it than I am have suggested that Discord is a better place to be. And in fact, Mike, I can see you wandering around.
Yep. I'm making burritos.
Mike's making burritos. Do you have burritos to share for everyone else?
Yeah.
This is primarily a fried rice meetup.
Am I on screen? Do you want to see my burritos?
We can kind of see you in the corner. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Hey.
Cooking that. We got some veggies sliced up. It's all happening.
We'll need live updates on the burrito status as the
more of that later.
meetup keeps going. Yes, please. So Flat White is basically a chat group because you don't have enough chat groups. And it's aimed at front end or more or less anyone who reading the captions is terrible.
Digital creatives is what I said. Anyone who's creating stuff for online or digital spaces.
Yeah. It's especially useful if you are a freelancer.
Yeah, well, I don't want it to be
necessarily
restricted to that, but I've always felt like just having a support group, like you'd have your weekly sort of stand up with people if you were going into the office, if you're a contractor or something like that, or even if you're just working at home, there's now like a lot of people who don't have that connection. So I was hoping to get a digital version of that and join up with what you've done with Flat White. So, yay. Flat White, was it flat-white.dev or was it just, I think I had to put a dash in it because I couldn't get the
I did
go
copy
there
it and paste it.
If you can show the site, people can sign up there and we'll launch it. And probably tomorrow we'll send out invites to everyone.
Yeah, so you can sign up now and then you'll get an invitation to join once we actually push the button.
All right.
But yes, do join us on Flat White. It's kind of like the after channel in a way. But the idea, I mean, eventually maybe we'll even have physical meetups out of Flat White, but it's more a casual thing where ask you stupid technical questions, especially if you're me. I think I've already asked stupid technical questions, haven't I? But you two can ask yours or answer mine, which would be great. All right, CSS color of the month. This exists for no logical reason whatsoever other than I think Wei Jing started this once in Singapore CSS. So we just pick one of the very many named colors of CSS and highlight it. So this month we've got crimson. If you're looking for a deepish red, then crimson's a great choice. So next time you're trying to fill out a palette, think crimson. I can't see my slides, what's up next, so I may just do wrong things here, but bear with me. That's later. Ooh. All right, let's go to our speaker. Our speaker this evening, I've stopped sharing so you can take over, Olivia. Olivia is what are you? Are you a freelancer or do you work for people?
I work for people.
Olivia works for people, but she writes CSS and she's very good at it. She's even learned about this thing called JavaScript, which I've heard of, but that's about it. So tonight she'll be talking to us about animation, because Olivia's code pen is the polar opposite of mine. I have technical proofs of things when I get stuck into a bug that I end up submitting to a browser vendor, whereas Olivia's one of those people that makes things look pretty and animated. So yeah, if you want an inspirational code pen, go to Olivia's. You can probably take over sharing the screen when you're ready.
Okay, yeah. Sure. I was going to say, like, you're too harsh on yourself. I think the reason why things kind of look nice is because I'm technically a designer first, who then code. But yeah, let me share my screen on desktop too. You should be able to see it. Holla if you don't. Okay, present. Okay. Yeah, so today my talk is animations with CSS and GSAP. But first, a little bit about myself. I'm a marketing developer with a company called Toggle Track. Marketing developer is pretty much just a fancy term. It's basically a developer dedicated to the marketing team. But because I work purely on the marketing team, the things that I do are different from in-app stuff. So rather than micro animations, for example, where you see, you upload stuff, you see the animation going on and stuff like that. I concentrate more on how to make the landing pages pop. And that can go from animating illustrations to maybe something a little bit more serious, like showcasing a screenshot, and then, have things animate in so that, it captures people's attention and so on. So today's talk is actually a bit more basic, like how I do stuff with CSS animations. Is actually more of a code along. And then after that, I sort of transitioned towards GSAP. At some point, it's JS, which is what I don't usually write. But at some point, it's required, I guess, even though I don't really enjoy it. But yeah, so it is basically, it's sort of like I'm doing the same thing with CSS and GSAP pretty much. So first thing, why are animations important? First is to decrease cognitive load, which in turn then improve the UX. Basically, you don't want the user to think so much, you're doing the thinking for them. So for example, it guides user to what is happening, for example, progress bars. So, the user is just not looking at a blank screen, or guide users how to proceed. Which is then, like, for example, if you animate the progress bar from 0 to 100%, maybe the next button appears. So you're basically hinting to the user that you should click them. So this is one of the most useful things of why you should use animations. Another one is grab users' attention. So for example, the annoying model that comes out, that forces you to, not forces you, but it really encourages you, I suppose, to subscribe to a newsletter. I personally don't like the whole model thing, but like on our marketing pages, for example, how it would grab the user's attention is that maybe they're scrolling through one of those long ass SEO articles, have the newsletter subscription sort of like pop up on the site a little bit and say like, hi, we have more articles if you like, please subscribe to us. So animations grab users' attention. And one of my favorite, it creates emotional connection. I suppose it sparks joy, makes the experience more delightful. Yeah, and I think that's why some people use it too much. If you look at, especially the design agencies and their websites, they have everything flying in and so on. I think honestly that is a step back in terms of UX, but I suppose with a lot of animations also come this feel that it's professional. That's why a lot of people do it. It's very sleek. So emotional connection. That's right. So let's just jump right into the code along. So I'm going to try one with, I'm going to do this animation with pure CSS first. And it's basically this something really simple. It's this moon thing. I'm just going to concentrate on this moon thing right here. I'm going to play it again. So you see like this thing kind of loops up. And this thing also loops together, and then they come together and stuff. So why are we attempting this? I feel like I need to mention that I'm probably one of those people in CodePen that does a lot of useless projects. All those really, I'll show you an example later, but you see what I mean. Like you see all these illustrations that use like 150 divs. Yeah, I'm kind of that person who does that. So, but there's a legit reason why we can actually do this with CSS. So for example, I did a quick test. If I were to export this into a GIF, whichever you fancy, 600 pixels by 600 pixels, the size is 800 KB. If I do a video, it's 123 KB, and then it can be smaller, obviously, if I want it to be a smaller size. But these two, sometimes it's very janky, especially GIFs. Like nobody really uses GIFs anymore for websites because it's really bad performance. But the video, like 50 KB, but it has to be a specific size, and if you want it bigger, then it has to be a bigger size, then you end up like importing it, or sometimes it gets janky. I have experience as well, me doing a video animation, didn't play in iOS, because it didn't autoplay in iOS because browser issues. So let's with CSS, I just did this in 2 KB. No, I'm not just saying that you should do this, but this is basically how I've done it. So this is the HTML. I forgot, I actually use a compiler, but each dot is basically a div. It's like this circle thing, which I'm going to concentrate on, is basically just one div. And then it has the uses the after studio element or before. And this is the CSS. I'm concentrating purely on the declarations for the transition itself. So for example, I want it to start at opacity 0. And then this is the animation that I'm declaring, which I'll go in, I'll talk about it further later on, but I want to talk about transform origin first. Transform origin is you need it for both transitions and animations. The difference between transition and animations is pretty much animations is multiple transitions. Because transitions go from one state to another, animation, you can go to multiple states. Transform origin is really important, especially for the example that I showed just now that we're kind of building where you're rotating. Look, so for example, the default of transform origin is center, 50%, 50%. If I were to rotate, let's just say 45 degrees, you're just going to rotate by itself. You can see my cursor, right? Okay, so it's going to rotate here, and it's just going to be a diamond if I were to rotate 45 degrees. So if I set negative 5%, 5%, which is here, because it always starts at the top left, negative 5% to the left, 5% down, the shape now doesn't move by itself anymore. It sort of moves like this around the origin, pretty much. So if I were to apply 45 degrees, this thing will transform here instead. It won't transform by itself because it's sort of circling this origin. So it's really important for this example specifically because we want that like nice loop going in. And then when we talk about animation, it's 3 seconds, which is the duration. Linear is the type of easing that I want to use. Pink loop is the name of the animation, which later on, that's the second part. Infinite is just how many times I want it. Like I want the animation to loop infinitely. There's actually, this is the shorthand, obviously. There's actually a lot or more. This is the full list. There are a lot of things here I don't really use, like animation direction, reverse. I mean, basically, it just goes the other way instead. I don't really find a use for it. Animation play state as well. When I was doing this talk and I was compiling, right? Like I didn't know this even existed, but it exists. And then I started thinking, like, what use case can I even use like for animation play state? I suppose. No, I cannot think of anything. I mean, if you think of anything, I guess you can, write in the chat. But animation play state and pause, and this is basically what it is. But I'm going to concentrate on these 4 things because that's all you really need to make like that transition go on. So this is basically it. So to explain what it is, there is 2 animations going on. The pink circle and the other one below with the border, I call it blue loop, I think. But they're all the same thing because they're technically moving the same way. So that one is just like a copycat of this, which just minor things. Pink loop, so what I do is the entire duration is 3 seconds. So what I'm putting here is from 0 to 50% and 100%. I want this to change from this state to this state. Why do I do 50% to 100%? It's because I want a delay in between each animation. So especially for logo animations, they animate in and then you stop for a bit because you want the user to see what the logo is, right? Because otherwise you're just, looping for no reason. So you stop it and then after I want it to stop. So basically if I put 50%, I want the animation to already be completed at 1.5 seconds. And then from 1.5 seconds to 3 seconds, I want it to just stay the same. That means no animation happens. And that's how you can do a delay in between each animation. It's different from this one, animation delay, which is very misleading. Animation delay basically only delays the very first animation. That means that if I were to put 1 second animation delay here, it waits 1 second, it runs the animation. But if your animation is infinite, it doesn't do that 1 second again. It'll just start go again, from the very start without the 1 second that you want in between each animation. So this is basically the hack. It's not really a hack. I mean, like, this is basically the only way you can get around it so far. But basically that's what it is. So I say from 0% to 50%, from 0 to 1.5 seconds. I want it to transform, its opacity is 0. I want it to transform from 0.2 because the circle is growing from small to big. And at 50%, I just want it to scale 1, the original size. And opacity gets a special one here because I can also remove this and have it just grow it, but I prefer it if, like, you can see the full color right away. So I just put it at 10%, which is basically at 0.3 seconds. You can already see the circle in its full color, because otherwise if I remove this, then it's going to be sort of like a bit shaded until it gets to like 1.5 seconds. And then this is the rest. Rotate 120 degrees. I want it to rotate 120 degrees. And because the rotation positioning at the end isn't perfect, I just put translate negative 20px, 10px. How do I get this number? Purely trial and error. As in, like, 0px, that don't work, 5px, no, just a little bit more, then do 10px, and then so on. If you listen to a lot of people who do a lot of animations, this is what they'll tell you. It's just purely a lot of trial and error. The concept itself is very simple. But for me, like, I maybe did like 10 minutes, for this just 2 elements. But a lot of times the animations are very complicated. They're dealing with like 10, 20 elements altogether. They're animating. So they can take hours, purely hours. And it's just pretty much like, okay, this thing should be 0.5 seconds. And they said, no, maybe 0.65 is better. And they just keep doing like that. So if you tell them time is all you need. It's very simple, but you need the time and the patience, I suppose, to get to it. So I'm going to show the code pen of what it really is. So this is what it is. Ta-da. This right now uses linear. The spicy, the extra sauce, the cherry on top, I guess, of the sundae is really the easings. Linear is pretty boring. It just goes like constantly. Easings is what make an animation pop, I believe. And easings are pretty much, you've seen all these graphs before. It's just basically how the element animates. So for example, this one goes from slow to quick to slow. This one goes from slow to, it sort of goes out a little bit. So if I were to apply it to the moon, to the circle, it sort of like grows to bigger and then it comes back smaller. You can also make your own animation. This is cubicbezier.com because that's what it is, by Leah Veru. So this is, you can basically do anything you want and then you can test it. This is the one that this is the normal one. This is the one that you're tweaking. So for example, for this moon thing, say for example, I do want it to sort of pop out a little bit and then go back to its original size. I want it to be much faster first, then only have it go out. So for example, it's like this, really fast, and then it goes out, maybe a little bit more. So once I got this, I can, so you see, so it's fast, and then you see it kind of grows a little bit bigger and it goes a little bit smaller. So that is basically just that one line that changed, which is why I think like easings itself, you see a lot of people, they use linear, ease, in, out, which is the typical, you can actually do a lot of different kind of things. You just need to, search for a guide somewhere and then, just copy and paste the code. Yep, it's pretty much that. And so this is before and after, sorry, close enough. But this is how I got it. And I personally, just with the minor tweaks of the colors, personally, if somebody were to ask me to implement on their website, I would probably go for the CSS solution, unless somebody tells me a hard no. I have done this before with screenshots, because otherwise, if it's not screenshots, then I will have to create the animated video. But personally, I'm not very good as well with Adobe After Effects. This will take a long time. So I have done, like, I took the easier way out, suppose, but I just pretty much coded up like a HTML markup and then have things animate. It's also, I believe, much simpler because you can kind of control much more easily, I suppose, when the user scrolls between like 200px, and then only start the animation. You can also do that with the video, I guess, but easier way out. I mean, you spend more time coding, but it is what it is. So this is an example of a crazy CSS animation that you can do. Don't do this in real life or in production, but it is possible. So Steve Gardner actually did this. This is pure CSS. Each of them are divs and so on. But to a more realistic example for production, this is done by Tiffany, and the Kirby eats you. It's the email, and then it sort of gives a feedback like it's like success. This is kind of almost pure CSS. The Kirby is SVG. You can animate SVG, with pure CSS, but it is quite difficult because there's so many moving parts. Also, SVG is like usually, a bunch of characters that it's very difficult to understand if you don't understand what DMZ means and so on. So to use this is where GSAP comes in. GSAP makes it really easy for you to play around with just normal CSS animations, and this is why I started using CSS animations, GSAP for CSS animations. It basically allows you to write a lot of CSS animations like on crack pretty much. So instead of like 2 animations, for example, that for that 2 circle things, I can do 12, 13 different types of animations to different types of elements without getting super confused. And then it also allows you to manipulate SVG very well. So if you were to say like, oh, I want this Kirby, fat Kirby, to a thin Kirby, you just need to define the before and after. And they do have a plugin where it allows you to just like go from fat Kirby to thin Kirby. It's literally one line. You don't really have to do anything else. So that's where like GSAP comes in. To illustrate how actually easy it is, this is the part with GSAP. So this is an example. This is not the real code for my example. This is an example of a code when I first saw GSAP. I was like, oh, this is really cool. I want to learn. And then I look into the JavaScript, in CodePen. It's really small as well, so it's even worse. And I see this, and I'm like, yeah, maybe not. And then I put it off for 2 years, and then after I come and revisit again, like in 2 years, it's like, well, maybe it's not that hard. It actually really isn't that hard. The reason why a lot of times you see this style code is because they're just animating a lot of elements at the same time, so they're just defining each one. For my example that I showed you with the ping loop, it's just actually just this. Took me 2 years to find out it was just this easy, but I got there in the end. So the 0%, so this is 2, right? You just need to define what TL is. It's just the timeline plugin. What I'm just telling the JS is like animate to this. So yeah, I'm just putting the 50% to 100% code in here. The initial state, I can just throw it in the CSS code. I took the easy way out. I didn't put the opacity at 10% anymore, but if I want to, I can just create another chunk of this. Instead of 2 seconds, I can just put 0.2 seconds and only for the opacity. That means I just want to, you basically, with every new thing, with different timings, you have to kind of create its own function pretty much. So this is the HTML class, the CSS class, and this is the duration, and this is just all the properties, which is basically, the syntax is different, everything is the same. Scale 1, rotation 120, you rotate, you translate X, -20, translate Y, 10. Transform origin can also be thrown into the CSS code. I just put it here just to show you that it can be done. I'll explain what Moonstart is later, but basically this is with GSAP, and with GSAP, it's sort of the same thing, right? So this one is a little bit different. I'm gonna have to go back and forth right now. Ooh, okay, so what is GSAP's strength and why should it? Because technically the CSS animation works, right? But the good thing about GSAP strength is that it's the grouping thing, and this is where I will sort of explain what this Moonstart is. So Moonstart is just a label that I'm attaching to this, and I can attach Moonstart to this one as well. Anything with the same label animates at the same time. So this one, so it animates together. But let's just say, for example, if I prefer the blue thing to only start 0.5 seconds. So I just do class equals 0.5, I think. So the pink one starts first and then the blue one comes in later. So this is a very simple example, but why it's so powerful is that it will save so much time. Remember I told you all these people tweaking 25 different elements and 25 different animations at the same time? if they group them together, it gives them, gives them a lot of sanity back and also a lot of control. So you can group like, okay, maybe I would label, the first 3 elements into this one group, and this group is in its by itself. So I can tweak this group first. And then after that, a second set of group, only start after this group finishes. So I can tweak anything in the first group, and then the second group will only come in later. If you do it with CSS animations, I think you can sort of get away with it with CSS variables, sort of, but it is very confusing. And this is where that's why a lot of people eventually gravitate towards GSAP, especially if they're doing intense, GSAP animation, SVG animations, I mean. So that's one of the strengths. The second strength is easing. So we have this thing, right? But it's just this, not even the bottom row. The bottom row, they're just showing what's possible. But it's only this, is confined to this graph here. But with an additional plugin, GSAP actually, you can do, this is this normal one that you see, but GSAP actually does this thing, like this elastic motion, so on, like a bounce motion that you can use. And then this intense one where I don't know when you can use it, but I suppose there is an option. So these crazy easings, eventually, like I said, easings are actually what makes, I do believe, is what makes and breaks an animation. So if you want multiple options, you cannot really use with CSS anymore. You eventually have to really use JS to help, basically pretty much screen swap. And this thing called stagger. I did this example, it's a plant, so I'm gonna show it to you first. So they come out, little things, and so on. So that thing is called stagger. If I were to do it CSS animations, I would have to nth child 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then delay the animation by 0.5 seconds each time. But with GSAP, it's literally only this sentence. So I use from scale 0 because I don't want it to show up, and then to scale 1 in a duration of 0.4 seconds. And then it's just this line here, stagger negative 0.1. That means I wanted it to move backwards. Show each item following 0.1 seconds of each other. A more realistic example you can use in production, this thing. So you see it's staggering. The items are one after another. It's the same concept, and it's very easy with GSAP, pretty much. So I believe that is the strength. So if you want to get started with the CSS animation, I do have a couple of tips. I'm start closing my talk now. You should always start small, almost always. When I say small, I don't mean maybe do the 2-div example that I did, because that's a very simplified version. I mean that if you do want to do that 50 elements thing, it's possible. You need to break it down into those little chunks, basically. A good example is this really cool thing by Shunya. If you see, a lot of things are happening here, and it's really cool. I'm gonna show that again. But when I say start small, this is a lot of things happening. I think maybe 12 to 15 animations going on. Each thing it's on its own. Actually, come to think of it, it's probably 20. But if I were to ask you to concentrate on just this branch itself, not even the flowers, because that's separate, just the branch, and you can see that it's actually just a very simple animation from 0% overflow hidden to 100% overflow hidden, so that the branch shows. But that's what I mean by start small. You break it down into very small pieces, and then it all comes together. And all these complex animations are basically just like that. Very simple concepts. You are just deciding when the things move and for how long, and when it stops, pretty much. Yeah, and my second tip is the convert if the GIFs or videos into frames. So for example, this is another example that I get. I wanted to do this one, but time. But this is really fast, and honestly, if a designer brings this to me and asks me to implement it, I'll just why, you at least do me a favor and slow it down. But basically, the easier way is basically to convert it into frames. So you can just see the animations really clearly. At the end of the day, you just need to know the end state, because the CSS or GSAP handles the middle states for you. So I know C comes in here, and while the O comes in and sort of animating, the K starts showing up and moving into direction as well. And then you can tell the O reaches here first, then only the C and K comes in later, and then this last O comes in. Converting in frames is much easier and much more manageable. And I think with you convert in frames and in different frames, so you can kind of know how complicated the animation will be. So for example, this is each state pretty much. Yeah, and next thing is docs. So I dive straight into GSAP and CSS animations without reading the docs. CSS animations, you can kind of get away with it, I think, because the browser kind of helps you. But GSAP, no. So like a lot of time spent just, trying out what happens, and then turns out it was in the docs that I didn't really read because it's too many words. But you should totally read the docs, is what I would suggest. Yeah, and pretty much, and then just keep trying and keep practicing. Eventually, you get very familiar with it, and it will come very naturally in the end, hopefully. Yeah. So thanks, guys, for listening to me. Any questions? I should stop sharing.
This is where we have thunderous applause. Yay!
Yay! Oh my god, I can't find the.
You're just gonna steal this from everyone now.
I got it.
Thanks for stealing.
Olivia, I had a question. I think I might have missed your explanation of this, so apologies if I'm making you repeat yourself. But why in the CSS animations, why were the 50% and 100% keyframes the same?
Okay.
Or were you creating space in the timeline for something?
Yeah, I was creating space in a timeline. So they don't really have a way, because the animation that I wanted to do is infinite. So that means that the animation keeps looping. So I wanted them to stay in one state for the user to read, the logo, for example. So that 50% to 100% is basically that time where, for the user to read, but basically it's creating space, because CSS doesn't allow you to create that space in between infinite animations.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else got questions? I have one anyway. With the animation timings, the easings, sorry, do you do custom ones yourself, or do you usually choose one? Oh, good, because I feel bad when I don't.
No, I just copy straight away. The guides are there for a reason, the cheat sheets. But I always find I always use there's only 2 favorite ones, and I just keep reusing them. I find that because it may be simple for one element, but because a lot of times multiple things are going on, it's probably better to keep it simple, so it's not too much stuff going on. So I always use the same 2 animations.
I remember years ago being at a conference where the designer was talking about animation, and they said basically if you use the default easings, then you shouldn't, and you're bad. And I always feel bad because I use them anyway.
I guess maybe they're talking about just one. I don't know. Because ease in out is quite nice.
It's probably one of those classic things where someone is obsessed about it a lot and just wants to shame anyone else who hasn't, without really thinking about it too much. We've got a burrito update from Mike. Thank you, Mike. Burritos were awesome. Very good. I don't think we have any fried rice updates. Any other questions for Olivia about burritos, animations, or fried rice?
Yeah, I can ask a question. When you start your animations, because you're working with HTML and CSS, so obviously there's all the other CSS things you can set, like not just the translate, but also you can set the positions. You have different things like flex boxes and grid. Do you find that a bit distracting, or do you use that to your strength? And how do you decide when do you use the other CSS, all the other stuff, versus just the transform and translate?
I actually am almost exclusively use transform and translate. Well, mainly because animating the positioning repaints the page, so it's really bad for performance. So I almost always use transform. I think there's only 2 that wouldn't affect too much the performance. One of them is transform, which is why I just keep using it. No matter what, if I know I can use it, I'll definitely use transform first. Everything else sort of does have some performance load issues, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else got anything? This is usually the bit where I make something up and say we've got time for one more, but we've got heaps of time. Thank you again, Olivia. That was awesome.
No problem.
It's made, like, knowing about the GSAP has made complex animations seem a lot less complex, I think. And
I can
knowing
ask
my
a question.
burritos were good. Oh, Kevin, yeah.
Have you had any success empowering designers with this toolkit? I find we often work with designers and giving, like, telling them, you have this powerful tool set, go crazy with animations, we can actually implement it, is a hard thing to communicate in a way that they can turn it into a tool for design. That believe thing that unfolded, I feel, would be an inspiring thing to show the designers on our teams, for example, and go, start thinking in that direction. That sort of stuff is possible. We could be doing that in our product. I'm wondering if there's any other ways to get designers' creative juices flowing towards what these tools make possible.
I guess, okay, I don't really have experience because technically I'm the designer. So I'm usually the decision maker.
That's the solution.
Easy, right? But I think honestly, showing people examples a lot. I hope that they are themselves are exploring, like, Dribble platform and so on. They overuse their own animation so much, but at the end of the day, it actually opens up the avenue that this is possible. I do think showing things, or like websites in general that can do it, is the easiest way. So, like, you can actually do this and implement this in your designs if you want to. It's probably that. I think to tell them, we're using this toolkit, you should use it. I don't think that helps, because at the end of the day, it's a coding toolkit, and it just because it doesn't, like, they don't code, so why would they need to look into it? For example, but otherwise you can say, like, oh, check out this cool animation. We actually are using the library that supports it. Do you want to implement something similar? I would say. I don't think they need to know what the toolkit is. Is what I'm saying, yeah.
It's probably, I guess it's more the inspiration. Is that what drives you, though? Because that's, you're the target audience, the designer.
Yeah, I mean, like, because a lot of times I lurk a lot, like, behind Dribble, just to see what people are doing. And then that's like the inspiration that comes on as well. That's the main place of inspiration, I suppose, and CodePen, obviously.
Yeah, I remember way back in the early 2000s when I started getting paid for this, encouraging designers to try stuff because they'd been told so often what they couldn't do. Technology is not capable, it's not going to be performant, all this stuff like that. And yeah, actually giving them the ability to challenge devs is a good idea. Yeah,
actually, if the designers have been in the industry for a long time, it's better to educate, like, say, things are different now. CSS can do a lot of things. You don't need images for shadows anymore. I feel like maybe they weren't up to date with the CSS updates, because I think we've grown a lot in the past, like 4 or 5 years. It's pretty insane. You can do a lot.
We don't need spacer GIFs anymore.
Yeah, I'm not even in that era, man. I think I was just like at the border of when you need an image for, like, shadows, and then after that, I think I was just sort of like at the edge there.
Alrighty, awesome. Thank you again, Olivia, for joining us all the way from Malaysia. Distance is no barrier when you're stuck at home. Yay. All right. Normally we do HTML element of the month, but I'm going to do something different this time and actually talk about CSS, which is relevant to us. I've just got a couple of disparate demos, just talking about a few things that are new and emerging. Let me make that bigger so you can actually see what on earth I'm doing. I'll wait till that has caught up. Can everyone actually read that in any reasonable way? I hope so, because you may need glasses if you can't pass this.
Looks good.
So this is, which is a CSS function. This is native CSS. So I'm not using Sass or anything fun like that. Now what is does is it lets you group selectors together. So in an example like this, where I need H1, H2, H3 underneath a class, I can rewrite this really easily using is and say is H1, H2, H3, and then jump straight into where I need to go. This is amazing. This is fantastic. And the first unusual question you'll get out of something like this is, oh yes, but what browsers actually support it? And the good thing is everything supports it that is currently supported, and that doesn't include IE because IE is not currently supported. So as soon as you are able to ditch IE, if you haven't already, you can actually start using this right away, because everything else is actually good to go. Yeah, really simple, but really nice to have. The next one is a trio, min, max, and clamp. You would have come across calc enough times in the past, which actually lets you do basic calculations. Well, min, max, and clamp are some other ones that have been added recently. And same as the is selector or the function, these actually are ready to go as long as you're not using IE anymore. And again, this is the year that you can actually ditch IE, hopefully. And I'll give you some quick, I've stolen this site. This is from Una Kravitz, who's done things. I've just been lazy. So min lets you actually set a minimum size on something. So in this case, the element's going to get no bigger than 400 pixels, but it won't get any smaller than 50% either. Max is the other way around, which is awesome. So you can see it actually starts growing when the window gets big enough. And then clamp. Clamp kind of does a bit of both. So you can set a min, you can set a max, and then what your ideal size actually is. I don't have some better examples than showing what these actually are. And I'll post this link later on so you can have a look at it in more detail. But these give you a lot of flexibility in layout that we haven't had in the past. And again, this is native CSS, supported in everything that's modern and current and good. Last one is looking slightly forward. So this is a masonry layout, and this is part of CSS Grid. So masonry lets you do this kind of thing where the containers actually fall into the spaces of each other. Because if you don't have masonry, what you'll get instead is blocks like this, where they'll join up on each row, but they won't actually blend in properly. The implementation of this is still pretty new. It's probably maybe 6 months away, maybe a bit longer. But it's got support where it needs to, so it won't be too much longer before we'll actually be able to pull this off. And if you've been doing web things for too long, you know what stupid things we've done in the past in an effort to try to pull off this kind of layout. So knowing that this is available natively now is quite extraordinary. At least it will be available natively. And all it is grid, template, rows, masonry. And it just, the browser does the magic for you. Just awesome, awesome stuff. They are my three. They are my three. Okay, slides. We had that. All right. Now, because we're all stuck at home, we can't really do conferences in person anymore. So a lot of conferences have had to change how they're doing things. Web Directions have taken the approach of splitting conferences over several weeks on Fridays. And I know I attended Code last year, which worked really well. But coming up soon, this is in April, is Web Directions Hover, which is a CSS dedicated conference. Yes. Take that, JavaScript, whatever you are. Haha. So Hover is coming up soon. The really fun bit is Hui Jing, who was co-host with me of Singapore CSS, and inspired a lot of the craziness about how we were on Melbourne CSS actually curated the conference. So she's been given license to go and pick whoever she wants to. And since she's connected to pretty much everyone, she's just picked her favorite CSS devs and asked them to speak about things. You'll see some familiar faces in there. We've got Rihanna Heath and Mark Dalglish, who've both spoken at Melbourne CSS before. Rachel Andrew is worth a ticket price on her own because she's so awesome. It's not really hard to justify this. So this is actually, the layout has not gone public yet other than right now. So look at this and wow, look at these awesome people. I could see this. So your next question is how much? Different pricing. As little as 145, which is pretty good. It's equivalent of a 2-day conference for $145, since you don't have to pay for a venue or food or anything else like that. Like Deliveroo or Menulog will take care of food ordering. You can pay a bit more and get access to the entire history of Web Directions conference videos, which is pretty good. And otherwise, you can actually pay for all the other 2021 conferences coming up, and there are a whole ton of them coming forth from Web Directions this year. But the best thing is, how can I not pay so much money, Chris? Because I don't like paying money to people. And the answer is you can use the code MELBCSS to get $50 off the Hover price, Hover Plus, which takes it down to $195 for the early bird. Or you can be a friend, which is apparently Melbourne CSS is not the same as a friend. And that will get you $100 off the premium. So $495 every conference that Web Directions is throwing at us this year, which is pretty hard to say no to. I have no particular association with Web Directions other than they just run good conferences, I should say. So, you know, in lieu of John actually being here to announce it, I'm just plugging the conference because it's good. All right, I will post these. I'll send an email out to everyone as well with the codes, just to make sure that you can not spend money and also join the very cool conference. Does anyone else have any announcements at the moment? Are you hiring anyone? Do you want to do anything else? Are you also from Berlin? We had someone from Berlin. Stunned silence usually means not much.
I can say Culture Amp, as always, is hiring. We're looking for, in particular, a lead front-end engineer to kind of mentor other growing front-end engineers across 3 or 4 teams, as well as being a hands-on engineer. So if you're curious about what we do and how you can help, hit me up.
As a customer, Iris being customers of Culture Amp, we get our regular surveys checking how we are, and they're actually really well designed. I hate it when people give you the, are you happy? Tell me how happy you are. The first thing I want to say to them is, go away. You've just made me less happy. But the way that Culture Amp have actually implemented it makes me not unhappy, which is good.
New for 2020, those surveys are now web content accessibility guidelines compliant. So we passed our first accessibility audit with the full version of those surveys. We used to have an ugly HTML only version that we sent screen reader users to, but now they get the full quality experience, and I'm very proud of that.
Awesome. Anyone else got anything? Hiring, otherwise, conferences, announcements? No, that's good. I'm actually hiring myself, at least at Iris within my team. And good thing you mentioned accessibility, Kevin, because I'm currently leading an accessibility squad at the moment. And we need you if you know how to do accessible things, because so many people don't. And a number of like code challenges I've reviewed where people just can't even handle the basics. Maybe you can. Maybe you should apply at Iris and join my squad and make things good. Since I'm on my laptop, I'm going to do this the hard way and show you what our thing looks like if I can get a screen working. the real challenge of what we're implementing is the product I'm working on in Iris is it's a trading platform, as in share trading. This is my local dev build, so it may fail drastically at some point. That's like Parallels is just spat dummy completely. Curiously enough, no one that we are aware of has ever attempted to make. There we go. Connection is lost. No one has ever attempted to make a trading platform accessible before. So we have no guidance really on what we're trying to do, but we do have the backing from the company to make it so. So this is an interesting and challenging project. So if you like interesting, challenging, and shares, then maybe you would want to join my team at Iris. But yes. Otherwise, thank you very much, Xavier, as always, for making our video stream work properly, because I would have no idea what to do otherwise. So I'm thoroughly incompetent in that area. Thank you to our sponsors, as always, for keeping us going. And as you mentioned, Kevin, Culturant does pay Xavier for his brilliance. Thank you, of course, to our speaker, Olivia. And you could have been anywhere. You could be sitting on your couch right now. You may be sitting on your couch right now. You could have been eating burritos. In fact, some people in the audience were eating burritos. But instead, you chose to join us here at Melbourne CSS. So thank you very much. We will be back in a couple of months, hopefully, if we can get our acts together. We're always looking for people to speak. You require no skills whatsoever other than having done something interesting to present to us. Oh yes, Kevin says you haven't paid him since COVID. I know that, you know, one day you'll pay for things again, and that's okay. We still love you, Culture. So yes, if you're interested in talking about something, doesn't even need to be longer than a couple of minutes, doesn't need to be anything particularly formal. This is a great way to do it. Just let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you in a couple of months. Thank you, everyone.